Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm excited to start our presentation on a very important topic. Today, we will be exploring a beautiful hadith that emphasizes kindness and non-harm. The title of our session is, There Should Be Neither Harming Nor Reciprocating Harm. Over the next few slides, we will discuss the meaning, the sources, and the significance of this teaching. Let's begin by understanding why this message is so vital in our daily lives. Let's take a closer look at this interpretation of the hadith. Some scholars, like Ibn Habib, believe that the two words, darar and darar, essentially mean the same thing, harming. They are used together for emphasis, highlighting the importance of the message. However, Al-Zarqa points out an important principle here. When we interpret a phrase or a word, we should give priority to understanding it as adding a new meaning to the sentence, rather than just emphasizing it. In this case, because darar and darar are in different forms, and there's no clear proof that one is simply an emphasis of the other, this interpretation is considered weak. This distinction is crucial because it impacts how we understand the severity of harm in Islamic teachings. And to connect this back to the core message of the presentation, remember, the fundamental principle is that there should be no causing of harm, nor any reciprocation of harm. It's about promoting safety, compassion, and fairness in our interactions. Now, let's explore a second way to interpret these terms. When we say darar, it suggests that no one should be harmed. This means that if someone is being hurt, they are not expected to endure that harm patiently. Instead, the focus is on preventing harm altogether. On the other hand, darar emphasizes that no one should harm another person. It's about actively avoiding causing harm and also refraining from reciprocating harm if it occurs. The key point here is that there should be no causing of harm, nor should there be any retaliation or revenge. This principle underscores a fundamental ethic of nonviolence and compassion, which ties into the overall theme of fostering understanding and peaceful coexistence. It reminds us that true harmony comes from both preventing harm and not responding to harm with more harm. Let's explore a third perspective, this time from Al-Kasbani. He describes darar as a situation where someone benefits from an action, but that same action causes harm to their neighbor. In contrast, darar refers to a case where the person involved doesn't gain any benefit at all, but their neighbor still suffers harm. Now, Al-Haytami challenges this view, asserting that it's completely baseless because there's no solid evidence to limit the understanding in this way. Essentially, he's saying that this interpretation isn't supported by the texts or principles we rely on. On the other hand, Al-Baji offers a different perspective. He sees darar as an act where someone benefits, but unfortunately, it harms others, so the harm is a side effect of their benefit. Conversely, darar is an act that brings no benefit to anyone and only causes harm to others. This distinction is important because it ties back to our core principle. There is not to be any causing of harm, nor is there to be any reciprocating of harm. It emphasizes the need to prevent actions that harm others, whether directly or as a side effect of one's benefits. Understanding these nuances helps us grasp the broader theme of ethical conduct and responsibility in our actions, ensuring our dealings are just and harm is minimized or eliminated altogether. Al-Baji appears to prefer a fourth interpretation of the term darar. He suggests that darar refers specifically to a situation where one person harms another, such as harming a neighbor. On the other hand, darar is used when both parties are involved in harming each other, perhaps in response to the harm they received. This reciprocal form of darar indicates that the act involves two parties, each possibly retaliating or responding. It's important to note that the key concept here is the distinction between individual harm and mutual harm. The phrase, "There is not to be any causing of harm nor is there to be any reciprocating of harm," encapsulates the ideal, an emphasis on avoiding both harmful acts and retaliations. Connecting this to our overall theme, it highlights the importance of maintaining peace and understanding that harming others, whether one-sided or reciprocal, is unacceptable. It underscores the value of restraint and the pursuit of harmony in our interactions. Today, I want to focus on a very important principle from the Hadith, which states, There is to be no harm nor reciprocating of harm. As I mentioned earlier, these words form a fiqh maxim that is universally accepted and applied across all 4 schools of fiqh. This means that causing harm to others, or even retaliating when harm is done, is fundamentally prohibited in Islamic law. Now, moving to the next key point, harm should be prevented from appearing as much as possible. If we see that harm has not yet appeared, our goal should be to prevent it from even happening in the first place. And if harm has already occurred, then our responsibility is to remove it as much as we can. This highlights the importance of proactive prevention. Sometimes, prevention is considered better than cure, as some scholars have stated. In essence, keeping harm from even beginning is an admirable goal in itself, and it's rooted in the teachings of the Prophet, peace be upon him. So, these fiqh maxims guide us to prioritize prevention and to avoid harm altogether whenever possible, aligning with the overall theme of promoting justice and compassion in our interactions. Today, I want to talk about the principle that harm must be removed or put an end to. Essentially, whenever harm exists, we are obliged to take action to eliminate it. For example, if someone builds something on or near a public roadway that endangers people, that construction must be removed to prevent further harm. It's also important to understand that a person is responsible for any damage they cause to other people's property or belongings. This principle highlights a key aspect of justice and responsibility in our actions. Now, relating this to the broader theme of our presentation, it reminds us that preventing harm and taking responsibility are fundamental in creating a fair and ethical society. It emphasizes that protecting others from harm is a collective duty rooted in our faith and moral values. This concept guides us to be proactive in stopping harm and accountable for our actions, which is central to the principles we're discussing today. Let's explore the core idea behind this principle. Essentially, harm should not be countered by causing another harm of equal or greater severity. The goal is to repel or end harm without replacing it with something worse. For example, if someone is starving, we can't justify taking food from another starving person to end their hunger. Doing so would simply replace one harm with another, which is not acceptable. This ties into the broader theme of justice and compassion that runs throughout our presentation. It emphasizes that our actions should aim to minimize harm overall, not just shift it around. The key point here is that we should always seek solutions that do not create a greater problem in the process. This principle helps us navigate complex situations with fairness and moral integrity, ensuring we act wisely and ethically, even in difficult circumstances. Let's explore the idea that sometimes a greater harm can be alleviated by causing a lesser harm. Now, at first glance, this might sound counterintuitive or even problematic, but in certain contexts, it's considered permissible. The key point here is that if removing a serious harm requires causing another, but that second harm is less severe, then this approach can be justified. For example, in Islamic governance, if the wealth of the rich Muslims needs to be used to support the poor, especially when zakat funds are not enough, then a ruler might take what is necessary. This is based on the principle that preventing greater suffering for the many can justify causing a lesser inconvenience or harm for some individuals. This idea is deeply connected to the broader fiqh maxims, which guide our understanding of justice and necessity. It emphasizes the importance of weighing harms and benefits carefully, and it reminds us that sometimes moral and legal frameworks allow for flexibility in extreme situations to serve the greater good. So, in our overall theme of balancing justice and compassion, this principle highlights how Islamic law seeks to prioritize the well-being of the community, even if that means making difficult decisions. On this slide, we see a principle that is quite significant in understanding how we balance individual rights and societal needs. The idea is that sometimes, the presence of a particular harm is accepted in order to prevent a larger, more serious harm. Essentially, if a small group or an individual is negatively affected by something that's necessary for the greater good, society's needs often take precedence over their personal needs. This concept is rooted in the idea that a lesser harm can be justified to ward off a greater one. Now, this ties into the broader theme of our discussion: how Islamic jurisprudence approaches situations where conflicts arise between individual rights and collective well-being. The fiqh maxims related to this hadith help us understand the importance of prioritizing overall benefit and preventing greater harm. It's about recognizing that sometimes sacrifices are made for the greater good, but always with careful consideration of the context and the potential consequences. This balance is crucial in ensuring justice and societal harmony. This slide emphasizes a fundamental principle in Islamic ethics: preventing harm takes priority over achieving benefit. Essentially, if an action has the potential to cause harm, even if it also offers some benefit, our first obligation is to prevent that harm. For example, if doing something might bring about a good outcome but also poses a risk of significant harm, we should prioritize avoiding the harm. This idea is rooted in the fiqh maxims related to this hadith, which highlight that safeguarding people's well-being and preventing evil are more important than pursuing gains. It reminds us that in our decision-making, especially when conflicts arise, our focus should always be on minimizing harm first. This concept ties into the overall theme of ethics and morality in Islam. It's about weighing the potential consequences carefully and choosing the course that prevents evil, even if it means sacrificing some benefit. It's a powerful reminder that our actions should always aim to protect and preserve life and well-being above all. Let's explore the key point on this slide. When there's a conflict between factors calling for something and those prohibiting it, the prohibition always takes precedence. This is directly related to the hadith we're discussing. If something is deemed forbidden, it indicates that there is some harm involved. So, in situations where everything else is equal, the judgment to prohibit will override the permission. This principle helps us understand the underlying logic of fiqh maxims, which guide us in making sound judgments. It emphasizes that safety and avoiding harm are prioritized over permissibility, reinforcing the overall theme of responsible and cautious decision-making in Islam. Let's delve into this important principle. Something harmful is not given precedence just because it was pre-existing. Now, generally speaking, pre-existing matters do take precedence in many situations, but it's crucial to understand that just because something existed before doesn't mean it automatically justifies causing harm. This ties into the broader concept that we shouldn't overlook the potential harm in favor of preserving something simply because it was there first. The key takeaway is that our judgment and decisions should prioritize preventing harm, regardless of whether an issue is pre-existing or new. This idea is also reflected in the fiqh maxims related to this hadith, guiding us to balance the preservation of what benefits us with the prevention of what harms us. It's about ensuring that pre-existing conditions or issues do not become excuses for causing harm, which aligns with our overall goal of justice and compassion in our actions. So always remember, precedence does not justify harm. Our principles must guide us to act ethically and responsibly, even when dealing with long-standing matters. As we conclude, I want to emphasize that in Islam, causing unjustifiable harm to others is simply not acceptable. It's a fundamental principle that we should always strive to avoid harming anyone without a valid reason. At the same time, if someone has been wronged, they have the right to seek justice through their Sharia rights. However, it's crucial to remember that this does not give anyone permission to go beyond what is necessary and cause additional harm. The key takeaway from this hadith is the importance of maintaining justice and compassion, even in difficult situations. It reminds us to respond with integrity and restraint, aligning our actions with the broader message of kindness and fairness that Islam teaches us.